Hi, this is Table Talk. My name is Sarah Townsend, and I am the graphic designer for SustainableLife.live and also co-owner and friend to Anne-Marie Sanson, who is the brain power behind SustainableLife.live. I'm super excited to be here to share part of my story and to really, more importantly, help to advocate and really spread awareness around eating disorders, social media, and mental health as it pertains to high school athletics and just really the athlete in general. So my story begins when I met Anne-Marie. I was a freshman in high school, Libertyville High School. I had just randomly decided to sign up for cross country. I wasn't really a huge runner before then. And so my early years in cross country were awesome. I loved the sport. It really brought such a passion to me, and I hadn't really developed a lot of other kind of like triggering symptoms until the second half of my high school athletic career. And so this is where I'm going to drop a little trigger warning. I will be talking about eating disorders as well as generalized anxiety disorder. So my junior year, I was on the varsity team. I was getting really fast, and I noticed that a lot of other girls were so much smaller than me, and I was very self-conscious. I was never comfortable in my body, and so honestly that led to cutting out meat. I went vegetarian, and for 7 years I didn't eat meat, and it's like, I don't even know why. Like, I couldn't tell you why I went vegetarian. So it was just kind of like those red flags that I don't know, like, I didn't tell people that I have an eating disorder, but I wasn't allowing myself to indulge in any sweets. I always had this mentality of like I needed to hit a certain mileage to, eat a certain amount of food, which is so backwards. And I don't know, like I felt very self-conscious in my skin. And my boyfriend at the time, like I definitely looked to him for like support, which I mean, like, it was not, you can't really seek that out in a high school relationship. You really need professional help. So that kind of carried over into my college career. So my freshman year of college, I actually ran for school, but I didn't really run for them because the summer before I was running like 40 miles a week and not eating enough, and I got this really bad stress fracture in my right shin. And at the time I didn't really think anything of it besides like, oh, I was just like too high mileage, like whatever. So it healed, and I just kind of brushed it off. I actually ended up transferring schools. So my sophomore through senior year, I was a student at the University of South Florida in Tampa. And I don't know, like on and off, I would have these really, really weird spurts of like feeling comfortable in my body and then feeling, that I was like the fattest person ever. So it was just kind of such a negative, like back and forth place to be. And I hated being in that like space of never really truly loving myself. So that's kind of a bit of how it started, but kind of talking more about like yoga and meditation, because that's how I met Anne-Marie. She oh my gosh, my favorite part of high school was truly diving into yoga. Fridays in the fall in cross country, she led a yoga class, and I was I didn't really know a lot about yoga, but I fell in love with it. When I was in Wisconsin, I made it a point to find a studio and practice, and even when I moved down here, like that was the number one priority. And especially after the pandemic, I started regularly practicing like 4 to 5 times a week. And last year I went through a teacher training program, which just really changed my whole outlook on like myself and my practice and my body. And it's definitely made me a better person. So I think what yoga and meditation has taught me, especially about like my eating disorder and my anxiety disorder, is that if you are not listening to your body, it will tell you when it's done, right? So we can't just keep ignoring our body's cues and thinking that our mind is somehow, not connected to our body, because that's not true. And so when I was just kind of like pushing the miles and cutting the calories and, not enjoying life, like my body was really telling me like, hey, like, I'm getting tired. I just wasn't really tuning into it. And so unfortunately, I ended up getting another stress fracture in my other shin this past year that refused to heal, because I just spent so much time restricting and not really getting an adequate amount of nutrients. And so that was a whole ordeal. I had to get surgery. But all that to say is, like, I feel like I'm on the other side of that and thinking I have so much gratitude for my yoga practice, because it's evolved to be this thing where it doesn't matter what I look like, it doesn't matter, what I'm doing. Like, a movement does not have to constitute running 12 miles a day. Movement is whatever is meaningful to you. So that could be like doing a stretch, and that's it. So that's kind of where like meditation came into my life. And then really quick, I want to talk about the impact of social media on mental health and eating disorder, and then especially as it applies to high school students. So when I was in high school, the one time eating disorders were brought up was in a tiny paragraph in a textbook in my freshman like required health class. And it was so boiled and watered down, and like it was just like such a stigma. And I remember thinking like, oh, like, anorexic girls have to be stick thin and fainting or something. Like, I'm not anorexic, like I don't have those things, like. And so it's just such a disservice that we're doing to athletes, but also just to students, to not talk about these really, really scary illnesses, because I promise you, like, if somebody would have came up to me, like a professional, and said like, hey, these are the symptoms or some of the red flags that can lead to this, how are you doing? I'd have been like, oh my gosh, like I'm not doing well at all. So I just wish that that support was there. And so I think this is kind of where sustainablelife.live comes in. It is so important, especially for athletes, to have a good support system, especially like when they're struggling. Like, I know when I was in the top 12 my junior and senior year, like my fellow teammates, we were all going through the same thing, but we were too afraid to say anything, right? And so it's kind of just this dog eat dog world mentality where it's like, well, we're all just struggling, but let's just, keep quiet, get our times and go home. And so that's not what we need to be preaching to athletes. I really think the work has to come from doing like grassroots movements and lecture series and just these support groups to help girls and boys to say like, your body does not have to be a specific size or shape, or have like a certain amount of muscle tone to be strong and resilient. And so again, I wish my experience would have been different, but I think now it's important for me to advocate, because I don't want anybody to get tibia surgery because their stress fracture won't heal. And so thank you so much for listening. Again, thank you so much for creating space for me to share and talk about these difficult topics. I know they're kind of uncomfortable to hear, but again, I think the more we talk about them, the more we normalize that these things are real, these things are happening all around us, and we cannot keep having athletes or students or even like adults like go through this alone. I think the most beautiful part about really sharing my story on my social media and with my friends and family is so many people have reached out to me and said, hey, like, I've struggled with this for so long. Thank you so much for, sharing. And it's like, wow, like, I thought I was alone, so the more courage that I've found in myself to share my struggles, it's just been such a beautiful way to find people who know exactly how this feels, because eating disorders are so difficult, and they're such a lonely experience. And I've been in recovery for a couple months now, and just kind of knowing that it's with me my whole life moving forward, I just think it's really important for me just to stay in recovery, and to do that, I know that I need to be standing on my soapbox and saying, hey, like, we need this education for everyone, because this can't keep happening. So again, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you soon.